Hello, everybody, and welcome to our daily look at the COVID-19 numbers here in Arizona. I'm Steve Irvin, filling in for Katie Bramwell, who normally does this, and joined as always by Garrett Archer, our ABC 15 data expert. And we're going to start, as we always do, with sort of looking at the latest numbers from today and the overview of where we are, some of the trends that we're looking at as well. So, Garrett, take it away. Tell us where we are right now.
All right, let's just start where we always start, the summary dashboard. So today, about 683 cases came in today, and that is and only 3 deaths, which is a great number for a Friday. Usually we have fairly high death reports on Fridays. This is out for 12,000 tests. So all in all, the numbers came in pretty good today. Low percent positive, very low death number. We're starting to see sort of filling into a pattern right now for the last 2 weeks or so, in which we get we're having slightly higher case rises and a lower number of deaths reported. And it seems that the case numbers are rising along with the number of tests. We have more tests, more cases, but death numbers are going down. So this is the pattern we've been in for about 2 weeks now, and we haven't seen any changes from that today.
And that's good news because it shows that we're doing what we originally set out to do, which was to flatten the curve, right? I mean, we know that the virus is here and it's going to stay here for a while, and until we can get a vaccine or we can get some of these other treatments that are on the horizon, like the Regeneron or Remdesivir, some of the things that have apparently worked very well for President Trump. Until we get those things, though, the virus is still here, so it's just trying to sort of maintain control of it. I think the best news is probably the death numbers have really been dropping.
Yeah, that is definitely the best news. If you look at, let me pull up the numbers alongside of each other. It will just take me one moment. But when you look at sort of the reports side by side, you can see this sort of pattern that we've been into in about a week or two. And yes, absolutely, on both the epi curves and the reported curves, it is the death numbers are dropping, which of course, good news all around. I'm pulling that up right now. So let me just get that up right here. Here we go. All right. Let's see. Okay. Oh, that's a new one. Okay. Here we go. These are them right next to each other. Let's see if I can get that lower third out of it just for now. Thank you so much, Producer Carrie. So here's the case numbers reported. You can see right here, you can see how we've had this slight increase in the average number of cases, and here a slight increase in the average number of tests coming back. And this is all reported numbers. And then right here, here's the death number in that exact same time period. You can see this going down. So this is sort of where we're headed, is slightly higher cases with tests and lower deaths. And that can really be attributed to, over the last several weeks, we've had increases in that under 20 and the 45 to 54 categories, which are not as susceptible to hospitalizations as the older demographics. And this is one of the reasons why we are settling into this pattern. The good thing, of course, is that we haven't seen an explosion. We haven't seen anything that would suggest that this is going to manifest into this right now. So we haven't seen it in the hospitalizations, the emergency room department numbers, pretty much anything right now. So as of right now, it's a pattern we can live with, I guess. Everything's under control as far as the hospitalizations right now. So if this is the pattern we have to settle into, then so be it.
And the governor has been pretty clear in saying that as far as he's concerned, we're not out of the woods yet. We still have to deal with this for quite some time. And he hasn't shown a lot of inclination, at least so far, to be able to actually lift some of the other restrictions that we do still have in place. It appears that masks are working. It appears that some of these capacity restrictions are working. And certainly the governor doesn't want to go back to this point that we saw in May and June when we did see the big spike in cases. But we will see, because there's obviously a lot of political pressure that always plays into this, and we will see whether he continues to do that. A couple of trends that we wanted to look at. I know that you mentioned earlier that under 20 cases are up a little bit, and in some areas where you might see a lot of under 20 cases.
Yeah, let me go to the zip code map to show you that. And I actually have, I said this before, I have a friend on Twitter that he does a lot of zip code observations, and he has a zip code map that he puts out daily. And this is a statewide map. So it's a little rough only because it is an Excel spreadsheet, the Excel map, but we'll just go on with it. You can see fairly level. The colors obviously is just this yellow here, and you can see there's not that many areas in the state where that yellow is significantly darker between each of the zip codes. You can see sort of higher numbers of growth for the last week in 85281 and 85008. That is attributed to ASU. You have 85009, which is mostly attributed to the lower Buckeye Jail complex. You have this one right here, 85204. I don't know exactly what this is, but I believe when you look at it that this might be the Banner Gateway on the 60. I'm not 100% sure of that, but that seems to be about where that would be. And so a lot of these zip codes that are seeing increases well, that's an interesting one right here. This one, I don't know, it would be attributed to that 47 right now. But for the most part, most of the zip codes that are saying higher than normal growth are coming from places with congregate settings or universities.
We're seeing a lot of comments here and people wanting to know about some schools, and there was one for the Liberty School District. That's zip code 85326. And there's another question about Mesa Public Schools as well. And we wanted to sort of get to some of the Mesa ones, but can we look at the 85326 just so we have that?
So I'll look at that zip code really quick, but we can spend a little time with the zip code, the school districts here.
85326.
85326. Sorry about that. 85326. Yes. Okay. This is a very popular zip code. We get asked about this a lot, and there was not a lot of movement in this zip code over the last week. Only 26 to 29 with about the same case rates. So that zip code has pretty much stayed where we would expect things to be right now. This zip code 85043. Slight increases from 58 to 75 with a slightly higher percent positivity. That percent positivity of 12.3 is interesting. That's sort of, I don't want to say alarming, but something to watch over time. 85331, way out in Cave Creek up here, you can see slight growths in the cases per 100 with a lower percent positivity rate. And then I won't have an 86, sorry, because I only have Maricopa County for this. And we can spend a little bit of time with the Pima County dashboard as well today because it's Friday. This 85254, it looks like it's gone in half in that zip code. I'm going to do one more. I don't want to spend all day on the zip codes today. Sorry. 85042, it's gone from 29 to 65. So it's triple over, or double, excuse me, over the last week or so with about the same positivity rate. So I'm going to go to the school districts right now. We'll look at Mesa. Mesa, you can see, had a little bit of growth, 33 to 49. And then Queen Creek, 73 to 61. It's gone down a little bit. Is there any other zip? You said you wanted Liberty? I don't know Liberty. Is that a
Liberty's that same zip code, 85326 that we checked earlier.
Oh, that was a zip code. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's a few others. South Phoenix schools. Somebody wanted to know about. One of the things that we wanted to sort of incorporate, because for quite some time now we have been as reporters loudly complaining that we really don't have access to all of the data. We have these county maps, which is what. Garrett is going through right now, which show, within the school district, the percent positivities, cases per 100,000, and how those compare to the benchmarks that the state has already put out. Yes. But now we're starting to see some of these school districts say we're going to be a little bit more transparent about the cases that we have had. Yes. And so there have been several school districts, and we're going to pull up some of them to show you. They've actually put out their own dashboard, which shows you exactly how many cases they've had per school. It's a little bit difficult to tell how many of those are active cases and exactly what those schools are doing. And we should say that school districts are required to notify parents and anybody who is directly affected by these kinds of things through some sort of email or letter, so that people that are directly impacted certainly have those numbers. But when we look at, this is the Mesa one. Mesa is the largest school district in our state. About 60,000 students in Mesa. Yes. And when we start to zoom in here, They've had some cases, and what's interesting is they've had 26 cases, I think, among students and 2 cases among staff. When we get down to the high schools, though, that's interesting.
Yeah, it looks like the vast majority of their cases are coming from high schools. They've had 26. I mean, it's what is this? This active COVID cases. You have 10, 19, 22, 20. Like essentially, almost all the cases are coming from high schools at this point. Now it's obviously a very small number. They are saying active COVID cases, which means they are not doing this as a cumulative number. It will fluctuate over time. But that's how they're reporting this. But almost no cases in the elementary schools. There's I only see one with 2, and that's this Guerrero. But other than that, you only have Pomeroy, Stevenson, and Lincoln that have active cases in the elementary schools, and then essentially everything but Dobson High School in Chandler has cases.
And so what some of that stands to reason, obviously, because when you look at the number of students and staff in some of these schools, there's just more of them. And so, and when you have more people in a building, and when statistically you're going to have more cases.
Yes, absolutely. That's there's no way to go around that.
Yeah. So, but that's also been one of the concerns is that, especially with some of these larger high schools, that if you have, say, 3,500 kids in a school, statistically, the day you open, day one, there's going to be cases in that school. There are going to be positive cases in that school. Whether you find them, whether they're detected, and that's another story. And that's always been the concern, is that when on day one you're going to open with some positive cases, by the time you figure out that those cases are positive, by the time people get, say, symptomatic or something like that, and you actually test those people, then you got to go back and look, okay, how long has this person been in the school? How many days were they in the school? How many people did they come in contact with? And that's always been one of the issues that schools have dealt with, especially when we look at other parts of the country where you've got, you have schools open up, and then you've got positive cases, and then they start doing contact tracing, and they isolate people, and they put people in quarantine. Pretty soon you have hundreds of people that can't go to school. And then the school sort of just becomes dysfunctional. It can't continue to operate on that basis. And that's ultimately what has shut some schools down, at least in other parts of the country. We haven't heard that happening here, but that's always been the concern there. Is there any way, Garrett, I guess, when we look at some of these new dashboards and we try to, I guess, compare them to what the county is putting out within those school districts, is there any way to kind of compare them to see how accurate, or whether they're sort of following the same path here?
Well, it's I guess I would have to cross-reference all of these districts with what the other case, when you look at the density, what those case numbers would look like, to see what the populations would be in those areas that are actually having COVID cases. Because, like, for example, I'm looking at Gilbert public schools right now, and their active COVID cases, I mean, it's only, they have 1, 2, 3, they have a couple at some elementary schools, but they have no schools in the entirety of Gilbert public school system that have more than 1 case active in that school. So so it's just, I'd have to look at this and see if we can actually make some sort. And the problem, of course, is because they're using active cases. And nay, miss, we are not scaring people. We are trying to tell you what the data looks like. And if I wanted to scare you, I'd be using different language. But it's hard to sort of take this data because it's active cases and then compare it to sort of the cumulative cases that happens on the congregate settings dashboards in the AZDHS and figure out sort of what they look like. It's just one of those things when you use active cases. That was one of the criticisms we had with ASU initially, was that they were only giving us active cases, and it's hard to track active cases. Active cases is a great number to give, by the way. I would never advocate to not give active cases when you can or decide you want to give them. But it's hard to compare apples to oranges when you're looking at cumulative cases versus active cases.
So active cases, there's a couple of sides to this argument too, just for folks, that active cases is an important number because it shows you what's happening right now.
Yes.
But on the flip side of that, you're also interested in whether those cases are growing. And so when you only have the snapshot of what's happening right now, and you can't compare it to previous week's data and that sort of thing, you can't say, well, how many active cases did we have? How many of those have sort of come off active, and how many more have become active, that sort of thing. It makes it difficult to sort of measure whether we're actually seeing spread in some of these schools. Is that relatively accurate?
Yeah, that's relatively accurate. Now, of course, obviously, if we saw active cases starting to go up exponentially in 1 or 2 schools, we know that that's a huge problem, because obviously they didn't catch that infection in time and it really started to spread. Like when I'm looking at these numbers in Mesa and at GPS, I mean, some of the things they don't tell you, when there's 2 numbers, let's say there's 2 cases, active cases, just based on how this thing has transmitted over time, there's a likelihood that that's actually like a sibling situation, because we've seen, just based on how the research with this thing has gone on, is that most of these cases, they spread within a home first, a household, and then they could move out into the community. So when you're seeing 1 case here and there in Gilbert Public Schools, but then when you see 4 or 5 cases and it's continued to grow and it's still in the active case range, then yeah, that can be a problem. And then obviously it would start to show up in that zip code as well.
So we did have a question about Gilbert Public Schools. Gilbert is one of the districts that is now putting out a dashboard. And as Garrett just mentioned, we're not seeing any more than a single case in any particular school that's showing up on the Gilbert dashboard.
I have it up. I have the dashboard up, and it isn't the only thing the dashboard is a quite literally a list of the schools and their active infections. So in Gilbert, for example, there's 1 at Ashland Ranch Elementary, Greenfield Junior High has 1, Highland High has 1, Mesquite High has 1, Oak Tree Elementary, Pioneer Elementary, and Transportation, whatever that is. I don't know what that is, but those are the only places that are showing active cases at this point.
So it looks like Transportation might be a bus driver that's
yes,
is probably
bus driver staff, absolutely.
Kind of somebody that's on staff. And then we also know that Chandler is starting to report its cases as well. We were just looking at that a little bit earlier. Chandler, I believe, is on a staggered opening. So they have started opening elementary schools first, because those people, obviously the younger kids are the least likely to be severely impacted by the virus. But the plan is to phase in the junior highs and then the high schools a little bit later. So right now they're just putting up data for elementary schools in the Chandler district. And so
and this is a great example of what I was just talking about. I've got this up as well. And the only thing they have in Chandler that I can find is 2 cases at Auxier, I'm probably saying that wrong, elementary school. And there's 2 cases, and the likelihood is that those 2 cases are siblings. And that's just because of the way that this thing spreads. Now, of course, we'll never know that, but we will be able to tell, since we'll be able to tell sort of what goes on, obviously, if we keep checking this day to day and see if that number increases over time.
One of the things that we're sort of looking at on the horizon, and we're going to have to watch these numbers very closely too, is that there are a lot of schools that are not in session still right now, but are planning to come back in session as well. Have you seen anything in the data? Well, first of all, I should ask this question. My read of the zip code map and the district map is that there are very few areas in the state where we're in the green for all 3 of those benchmark categories. That there are a lot of schools where we're in the yellow, which means we can go to a hybrid model, but very few in the green. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when we do see, like for example, on the zip code map, when we do see things going into the green, and I'll just pull it up again so we can show it. When we do see zip codes moving into green, we do have a couple. Obviously, we have these very rural zip codes that are considered minimal transmission, but we need to remember that in many of these zip codes, these are quite literally just administrative boundaries. There may not be. I mean, you see this zip code. There's probably very few people that live in this particular zip code. This particular zip code near the lake, 85390, very few people. So we're talking very, very low population numbers. We do get these every once in a while. We do get these inside the sort of the exurban, suburban area of Maricopa County that do flag themselves green. 85387 is one that's been flagged green this time and has no cases essentially, but they tend to fluctuate. This a couple weeks ago, Sun City, this area, there was a green zip code, and then it got removed. And now this one's green, and it could very well go back to yellow next week. So we see a lot of fluctuations with these zip codes. So we're not seeing really any sustained movement in these zip codes, where we're seeing sort of like areas, for example, like areas like this, where it's still a rural area, but we're getting closer to the actual Phoenix suburbs, and we're not seeing them turn green anytime quite yet. So we're like you said, Steve, a lot of this is we're still in moderate transmission in many of these places.
And so slow and steady as she goes.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the numbers that we're seeing. As you mentioned, in Maricopa and Pima counties, our two most populous counties, we're actually seeing percent positive rates dropping. They're pretty low at this point.
Yes. So we are seeing today was an interesting day for percent positive. We had a lot of testing done outside today. And some of the percent positives we saw from the rurals were quite large. Now, there wasn't a lot of tests done in those areas, but we still saw some very high numbers. Like, for example, Graham County today, 20% positive. Greenlee County, which is minimal transition, or minimal transmission rate, and that was 14%. And some others that were still a little high. Apache County had a 7% positive. But then when you go to some of the larger counties, the urban counties that have more tests being done, Coconino, 2.3%, Maricopa, 3.7%, Pima, 2.5%. So we have very, very low percent transmission rates for today in these counties where more tests are done. So it seems that in a lot of these rural counties, they're playing whack-a-mole with some of these, while they're doing their contact tracing, because they can do contact tracing a little easier in these rural counties while they're doing these contact tracings. They seem to be playing whack-a-mole with this thing, where they test and one day it's a high rate and one day it's low. So
can you give people that are watching sort of an idea of the dichotomy, I guess, between the number of tests we're doing in, say, Maricopa County on a daily basis versus the number of number of tests we might be doing in, say, Greenlee or Santa Cruz or La Paz counties? I mean, these are all very rural counties. So when you see those big, as you mentioned, you see those big percent positives, it's a much lower number of tests. In fact, I've really been surprised that we can do, what is it? We did 8,000, 9,000 tests in Maricopa on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And in some of these other counties, it's what, 100 tests?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, Graham County, that showed the 20% positive today. Graham County only did 29 tests. Which is interesting because Graham County has been on and off sort of the radar of an area where there could be a potential outbreak. But obviously they're only doing 29 tests right now. So that to me suggests that that's not community testing. That is targeted testing when you're only doing the contact tracers are reaching out and testing people that have had contact with, like, say, a previously positive case. But in the case of Maricopa County, where you've got 8,500 tests, there's a lot more community testing going on with those numbers than you get with these smaller numbers.
There's one comment here. One case per school, kids should be back in school in person full time. If the district decides that the kids can go back in school in person full time, they have that option. A lot of districts have decided not to do that. I think Mesa just announced yesterday they're going back hybrid. And they have a lot to deal with because they've got such a huge district. But, as we just mentioned, most of the school districts in the state are not meeting the state set benchmarks for actually going back to full time in person. And, the issue and the worry here, and I've heard this from people in the governor's office, I've heard this from Republicans and Democrats, is that if we start putting people back together, we're going to see exactly we've been through this. We're going to see exactly what we went through in May and June, where in June and July, we came dangerously close to reaching capacity in hospitals and having to go to surge capacity. And that's always been the biggest worry for healthcare professionals, is that we wind up like we saw in Italy in March, or in New York City, where there are so many people in those hospitals that we can't take care of them all. And imagine actually having the virus, needing a bed, and being told, sorry, you got to go home. And we certainly wish you the best, but there's not much we can do for you. That's happened. And that's happened in other places. And that's really what state officials, emergency management officials have really been trying to avoid here. And that's why we're doing this slow and steady approach. So I know there's a lot of parents out there who want their kids in school. And I know there's a lot of frustration with the online education that the kids are getting right now. I know that's something I hear from teachers. It's something I hear from parents. No one likes it, and no one wants to be this way. But we certainly don't want to go back to this meteoric rise that we saw in cases a little bit earlier, because like it or not, the virus is still there. The numbers show us that the virus is out there and it's everywhere. Garrett, I wanted to mention, because I saw this earlier on a map, and maybe we could talk a little bit. We haven't talked a lot about Coconino County right now and what's happening in Coconino County. I know that as we talk about universities and the potential for spreading the virus, we focused a lot on ASU and U of A, but NAU is also a good-sized school and a big part of the Flagstaff community. Is there any cause for concern there, or what kind of numbers are we seeing?
I'm going to check the zip code really quick. I'm pulling it up. I do have a list of sort of the top growing zip codes in Arizona that I keep for on a week-to-week basis, because it is good to look at them by day, but it's also helpful to see these by how they're growing per week. And what I can see is 86001, which would be the NAU zip code, is still the fourth fastest growing zip code from the last week at 49 cases. So, obviously Flagstaff, NAU, they're still, 85281, which is ASU, is the second highest. 85009, which is probably Lower Buckeye Jail Complex, is the highest. But we are still seeing pretty significant growth in universities. It's still happening. So it's now, when I say significant growth, this is all contextualized in the grand sort of picture of everything, in which we're seeing a very slow and steady increase. It's an extremely slow increase. So that just to contextualize that, but we are still seeing growth in the zip codes in which universities exist. So very important to notate that.
Is the growth that we're seeing sort of in line with what we might have expected to see, what we were sort of projected to see? Because I think nobody expected that when we started bringing kids back into campus at NAU and U of A and ASU, that we wouldn't see some increase in growth. I mean, obviously, when you put thousands of students back on campus, there's going to be some cases, and you're going to see some growth. Is it on line with kind of where we projected this stuff, or do we even know?
I mean, in many ways, it seems that Arizona did a really good job of dodging what could have been a bullet when it comes to opening the universities. Here's the reported curve on what our cases look like, and you can see this bounce right here. This increase that matches the slope of the initial increases, but then it just stops. So what's interesting about that is it just shows that, like, while we were, and this time period does coincide with the universities beginning to come back into school. So these two bounces could be attributed directly to those universities. But the good thing is that, we sort of dodged the bullet, because the growth didn't continue, and it sort of fell instead into a much slower progression. And I think at that time, when we were discussing this, sort of the idea was, okay, now we've got these antigen tests. We're testing a lot more because of these universities, but what's going to happen in the community from that time forward? And we haven't seen any sort of we haven't seen any indicator of any exponential growth in the state since that time period. Growth, yes, not exponential. And I think that's what people were most concerned about. And so far, it doesn't appear that we are on a pathway that's going to happen. So that is tremendous news if you think about it. I mean, we'd rather this kind of be more boring and just show things are slowly, increasing or decreasing and managing the virus, as you said, instead of looking back at where we were back in May and June and July.
Angela asks, and I don't know if we can answer this question exactly, but how do these numbers they are speaking of compare to the regular flu spread every year?
The thing with that's interesting. It's very difficult to, I don't even know if I can answer that directly right now at this very moment. And the reason that is because obviously with flu spread, it's taken care of a little differently, because they really only track flu when it goes into hospitalization. You don't have the same sort of situation in which we're testing and getting positive cases for COVID-19. You don't have that with the flu. So you sort of can only compare other metrics with the flu to see what the spread would be like. I mean, we have enough data across the country to know that this thing is far more infectious than the flu. But that's right now. That's all I can say on that right now, because I have to see what sort of data we can use to compare, and I just don't know yet.
I think it's important to note too that we often hear people talk about comparisons with the flu, and because the flu brought us our last major pandemic. The flu virus we deal with today is the same one we dealt with in 1918, 1919, when we had that massive pandemic that killed 50 million people. And there's a couple of distinct differences here. We know just from the numbers that the death numbers from the flu versus death numbers from coronavirus, the coronavirus are significantly higher. The CDC puts that about 10 times higher. So it's 10 times more deadly. So that's one part of it. The other part of it with the flu is that we have treatments for the flu. We have approved drugs that have been proven safe and effective to treat the flu. We have a vaccine that is widely available and tens of millions of doses available. So we can put the vaccine out there in the community and create at least some level of herd immunity. We don't have any of those tools in the toolbox for coronavirus right now. And so when it spreads, there's not much to treat people, and there's no vaccine to prevent people from getting it at this point. And that is the concern. If we had a vaccine, we'd be able to open up a lot of different things. We'd be able to do a lot of different things. If we had widespread treatments that are available to do this, we'd be able to help a lot more people. We'd see those death rates plunge. People might still get sick, but we wouldn't have the high number of deaths that we have in comparison to the flu. So there's a lot of different things that go into that. But like the flu, it gets out there in the community, and you've got to avoid getting it. One of the things that we're particularly concerned about, though, is the combination of the flu and the coronavirus, because we do see people winding up in the hospital every year from the flu. And if we also add people that need treatment for coronavirus, we can again see those hospital numbers overwhelmed. Garrett, anything else that we need to touch on before we wrap it up here on a Friday? I think it's always important to look at what the modeling shows, and we have early on in this in this epidemic, we saw modeling that was really scary and really concerning. Now we're seeing basically the projections that show we can continue to keep that curve relatively flat if we keep doing what we're doing.
Exactly, and we'll just go over the modeling really quick. I'll use just the MIT model, and it's basically echoing exactly what we're talking about, this sort of slow and steady potential increase. When you look at these numbers, you see this is their total deaths. It does presume that the deaths will continue to drop, which we have seen. You can see the total deaths will obviously go up, but this is a cumulative number, so you would expect that to go down, but very, very low. The RT of this does seem to stay under 1 for the entirety of the projection, which goes to October 30th. And you can see everything is sort of slow and steady right now. It says that, well, it's been fairly correct if you look at what these numbers look like, with the exception of that jump, the sort of the bounce that we had from the high school or from the universities. These numbers have pretty much played out as far as what the slopes are like. So as you said, Steve, everything's very slow and steady right now, and it's basically saying, yes, right now your curve is flattened, and we'll see what happens in the future. But so far, this is what they're telling us.
So for those of you who are still looking for school numbers, keep in mind that you can go to the County Health Department, Maricopa County Health Department website. If you live in Maricopa County, they show you the growth of cases and some of the metrics by both zip code and by school district. And then we pointed to a number of school districts that have already put up dashboards to give you an idea of how many active cases they have. The largest school district, Mesa. We've also got Chandler. We've also got Gilbert. I think there are some others, but I don't want to put those out there for sure. But if you're wondering about your particular school district, I think the best thing to do is to Google your school district's website, go to their website, look around, and see what they're reporting on it right now. So it's important to be able to arm yourself with that information just to be able to make good decisions. Garrett, as always, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for giving us some good news here on a Friday. It looks like we're slow and steady and not seeing any enormous spikes in cases. As always, if you have questions for us, send them to share@abc15.com. Send us an email and let us know what you want to know, and we'll try to tackle it on this show. Thanks so much, Garrett.